a very special edition of Three True Values. This is the Coaching Carousel episode. We will break down all the moves across college basketball that we have seen starting early in the process. We had openings come up before the season even began. Of course, those were filled by interims. We had coaches step down midway through the year. We had announcements retired along the way. And through all of that, we found some very interesting coaching hires to make, saw some trends start to develop. We will grade each and every one of those here on today's episode. We have 14 high major openings, which have since been filled. We will walk through the first 7. We're going to go alphabetically here. I think it's the easiest way to go ahead and break these down. So we will start with Florida State. We will make our way all the way through West Virginia. First 7 here in the first segment, the last in the second segment, and then we will close out with a special third segment here where we're going to talk about some of the coaches who could be primed for NBA jumps. Maybe not this year, maybe not next, but sometime during their career, who in college basketball has what it takes to be the next coach to make that kind of leap in competition. We've seen some assistant coaches make a jump down. We'll talk about that here in a second. We've seen all kinds of moves in the past of college coaches making their way to the NBA and testing their skills there. So it is an ever-changing landscape. Lots to look at, lots to break down here on the show. So let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Let's start talking about the coaching changes that occurred over the past couple of months. We start, as promised, with Florida State. Leonard Hamilton on his way out, a legend in the coaching ranks. He walks away from the sport as one of the most accomplished head coaches, as a historical figure in the history of college basketball, and leaves an opening at Florida State. Now, this Florida State job at times during Leonard Hamilton's tenure has been one of the best. He has had that team up in the top 5. He has had that team in contention with top recruits, with magical runs through the season, all kinds of things he has brought to that program, but a downed trend over the last few years. Things had unquestionably gone the wrong way. It was time for a new face, for a new era there in Tallahassee. So as he gives way, the question was, how would they replace such a legendary figure who had not been getting the results? Do you keep continuity? Do you go to someone who has been part of his culture, will go through the same roster building, program building philosophies that he has? Do you go for a young up-and-coming head coach? Do you try to go poach a big fish? What would they go do? What they end up doing is they kind of split the difference. They land on 34-year-old Sacramento Kings assistant Luke Laux. He comes in as a former Leonard Hamilton player. He spent time at Florida State before getting into his coaching career, which took him ultimately into the NBA, as we now know. So, what do we make of this hire? I give it a B-, and here's why. It's definitely in the range of a B, not going to drop it into the C range, but if you're looking at the hire, there's risk here. There's real risk in that, first off, you're hiring a 34-year-old head coach. We just saw Todd Golden win a national championship at 39, and he was the youngest to do it in decades. That doesn't mean that Laux cannot have a great career, that he can't build towards something like that, or that he can't overachieve and get there quicker. But what it does say is that he has a long way to go to become the full coach that he will be. He is not at the peak of his coaching ability at the age of 34. He has a lot of room to grow into this job, which could be a good thing. He could take over and continue to build this program. Some would hope then that he would have it as long as Leonard Hamilton held that job. So, what are the positives? What does he bring? Obviously, youth. That's big. Continuity. He's not going to come in and be preaching a completely different message than what Leonard Hamilton had. He has talked about the influence that Hamilton had on him, the way that he views basketball, the way that he views coaching. So there are some key traits here that you look for that Florida State clearly checked boxes on and got right. But ultimately, the reason that this was kept from being a higher grade in the higher Bs, I think, is that he's starting kind of behind the eight ball here. Florida State, like I said, has struggled in recent years in a conference that has had struggles. The ACC has been wide open. And so, do I think that Laux is the type of home run hire that immediately moves Florida State to the top of that conference? I'm not so sure. So, that is why it gets a B minus. We move on here to Indiana, where Mike Woodson announced his retirement midway through the year amid a lot of pressure from the fan base. Things had not gone the right way there. There were a lot of questions last year if they should move on and hire Dusty May, who takes over the Michigan job instead when they stick with Woodson and had them make a deep NCAA tournament run. Looks to be one of the best coaches in college basketball. So how do they recover from that? How do they bounce back? Who do they go get now that can put them in that same conversation, that can help alleviate the mistake that was made over the past 12 months? Well, they do what they could, and they hire probably the second best hire of last year's coaching style. They go get Darian DeVries after just 1 year at West Virginia. And so now we start to see the domino effect of one big opening, a blue blood going and getting their guy, opens up another big time premier job in college basketball. So for DeVries, after just 1 year at West Virginia, I think what he proved is that he can put the pieces together, he can build out, and he can make the most out of whatever roster he has. And if you're Indiana, I think that that's exciting, and that's why it gets you an A minus. I believe it's the same grade that I gave the DeVries hire last year at West Virginia. It was only right 1 year removed to do the same here. Obviously, he had a long run of success at Drake. His son, a big part of that, now will follow him to Indiana and be a big piece of this year's roster as well. So there's kind of a kickstart there on the first roster that you're trying to build. But of course, that is not everything that you're looking at when you're committing your program to this head coach. Instead, what you should look at is the long track record of winning and overachieving with the talent on the roster. Now, you add on to that the fact that he is at a blue blood program. You look at the jump up in talent that he got going from Drake to West Virginia, the success that he was able to find there in year one, despite obviously missing out controversially on the NCAA tournament. And imagine what he can do with more NIL, with more recruiting, with more history behind the program. Can he get this Indiana program off the mat? Can he bring them back towards the top of college basketball? That's what everyone is waiting for. That is what we will find out as he takes over. I think that he's got a good head start in doing so. I think that he's right at the top of the list of guys that I would have called to make that happen. Now moving on, we go to the Iowa job, which was opened up when the school parted ways with Fran McCaffrey. A little bit of a surprising move. Not that he is no longer the head coach at Iowa. It felt like things had started to trend the wrong direction, and that it could potentially be time for a new voice in that program. But McCaffrey made it clear he was not looking to retire. He ends up already taking another job in college basketball. He will be the Penn coach moving forward. But Iowa said, look, we cannot just wait this out. We cannot simply wait for this legend. We have too many people, too many great coaches with Iowa ties that are out there and on the market who we could go get, who we could go turn our program into something more if we can hire them. And that is why they got Ben McCollum, the new Drake head coach, just 1 year on the job at Drake after taking over for Darian DeVries. He gets an A minus for this move, and here is why. While he only has 1 year of coaching experience in college basketball, at least Division I college basketball, I should say, he also has ties to the area. So there is a culture fit there, an inherent just fit of knowing This guy understands what they're trying to do at Iowa. And I think a culture fit in terms of what his general philosophy has been throughout his coaching career. He is not looking to go get 5 stars. He is not going and looking to just build a superstar roster. He wants pieces that are going to fit together. He's going to play a unique style that benefits his players. They slow it down. They play one of the slowest paces in college basketball. He brought a group of Division II basketball players to Drake and made the NCAA tournament and then made a run in March. So he is a guy who is going to get the most out of all the recruiting that he is able to do at Iowa. He is going to find the right pieces in the transfer portal to fit his style of play, to offer that sort of changeup that I think is needed to have good success in that Iowa job. So I really do like that hire. I think that there's some potential for Iowa to shake things up there. We now move to the Maryland job, which was opened up when Kevin Willard headed out. Controversially, the fans were not particularly happy with that move, but they land on Buzz Williams, and this one gets a B minus, or excuse me, a B plus. And this is one of the most fascinating hires that we saw, because after Kevin Willard leaves the job, and as I said, a little bit controversially, a great NCAA tournament run, he ends up making some public demands. Maryland fans feel like he's not respectful of the program, of the history, in the way that he goes about it. Well, now he's gone. And so, understandably, they looked to insulate a little bit. They wanted to go get a head coach who understood Maryland, who understood them, the program, the history, who wasn't going to leave them high and dry. They wanted somebody who was one of their own. Unfortunately, when you looked at the top candidates, there were no home run hires who fit that sort of mold. And so instead, what they do is they reach out, they find out that Buzz Williams is available, that he is on the market, that he is looking for a new challenge. And I think that that is suddenly about the best you can do. Except there's one hole that keeps this from being in A range for me. The Maryland fan base is frustrated in large part because of a decision that seemingly was not based purely on the success of the team for Kevin Willard to head out. Buzz Williams, throughout his entire coaching career, has made it a known trend. This is a part of what he does. There is a 6-year cycle here. And so I do wonder what the fan base is going to feel 6 years from now. If Buzz Williams ends up on his way out to another job, particularly another job that might be viewed as lateral, how will they react, regardless of what his tenure looks like? This is a coach who has had great success everywhere that he has been, who has overachieved everywhere he has been. From Marquette to Virginia Tech to Texas A&M, he now arrives at Maryland. I think he will do the same here. I think that he has a culture that he instills. I think that he creates an incredible connection with his players. One of the most genuine coaches, one of the most interesting coaches in college basketball to follow. But what I watch for here with Buzz Williams at Maryland is this ticking clock. Because he lives under this philosophy. Throughout his career, he has shown you. He wants to stick somewhere for 6 years. He believes that whatever you accomplish in those first 6 years, overachieve, underachieve, whatever it is, it becomes the standard. And so if you have overachieved over those first 6 years, it does not matter what you do in years 7, 8, and 9. If it does not match up to the highs of years 1 through 6, it will be viewed as a failure. That's when you end up on a hot seat. That's when you end up having to get into uncomfortable territory with the fan base. There's also an element of mixing it up. He's a guy who's always looking for a new challenge. By changing jobs every 6 years, you ensure that. You go through the general cycle of a 6-year contract and then find a new place with new challenges, new people, a new culture. So, it's going to be good for Maryland on the court. I think that they will find success. I think that they will win a lot of basketball games. A B plus, a worthy B plus. I just hope that in 6 years, the fan base does not have a negative reaction to what has become an inevitability of his coaching tenures. And so as we move on here, we're through the first 4 jobs. And so next we have to talk about Maryland, which was the first one to close. We got the news that Jay Lucas would be the next head coach at Miami before the season even ended. He leaves the Duke assistant job that he had filled early in the season and starts the building process. This, of course, comes after Jim Larrañaga steps down midway through the year and leaves them with an interim. That, of course, had wide-ranging effects on the transfer portal, on their ability to field a competitive team. Just a disaster. I mean, things have fallen apart at Miami over these past couple of years, after Larrañaga had them in the Final Four just a few seasons ago. So a very confusing bottoming out here of the program that had them reeling. And what do? They go out and they hire the hottest young assistant in the game. They get the next guy in line to become a high-level college basketball coach. And it reminds me, obviously, under very different circumstances in terms of the connections, in terms of the way that it came about, but it reminds me in a lot of ways of the John Shire appointment. Was he the biggest, best name for today if you were going to pick who you wanted to coach any basketball team? No. But was he the best young up-and-coming assistant? Yes, he was that. I think that's what we have here. I think Miami does really well, and it gets a B plus because of that. I can't go into A territory because he is not a known commodity. We haven't seen him in that lead seat yet at any point during his coaching career. He's got to learn along the way how to do a lot of things. He is running a program for the first time, and so there will be some bumps and bruises. He will continue to grow in that process, but he's got all it takes. He has recruited at an extremely high level. He has done a lot to build connections. He was a big piece of building that Duke roster, the philosophy behind that Duke roster as well. So I really like what Miami has here. I'm wondering, though, what else behind the scenes has to get cleaned up? Because Jim Larrañaga was a really good coach, and I just cannot accept that after success early on in the transfer era, suddenly everything just collapsed. So we will see what else that program has to get straightened out over these next couple of seasons. We will see if Jay Lucas can get that thing back up to the top of the ACC and competitive in the NCAA tournament. Moving on, we have the Minnesota job, which sees Ben Johnson head on the way out and Nico Medved takes over. I have been a big fan of Nico Medved and his work at Colorado State over the last several years. He is a coach who always seems to get his team playing its best basketball at the perfect time of year. His teams come in to March red hot. His Colorado State team has made many runs into the NCAA tournament, has been a real force in the Mountain West, which has turned into the best outside of the power conferences at producing real NCAA tournament teams. He has also, and this is an underrated part of what Medved has been able to do at Colorado State, he has strung together a really nice resume of NBA success stories. Multiple players are in the NBA now or on their way to the NBA from Colorado State. Not something that you would typically expect from a program like that. So Medved gets an A- here because I think it's pretty much the best possible hire that Minnesota can make. Obviously, connections there. He's returning to the Midwest. And so just a home run in terms of filling this with the best possible coaching prospect. I don't think they could do any better. I don't think there was a name out there on the market who was within reach for Minnesota better than Nico Medved. So an A- there. I'm not sure how quickly he can get this thing into a competitive Big Ten program, but I have every reason to believe that at least down the stretch in March, he's going to have them playing their best, and that's always going to give you a chance to get red hot, to go through a late surge and find your way on the right side of the bubble, as he has done many times before. As we close out this first segment, this first half, we've got a rarity. We have a first here in coaching grades. The first time I have ever given out an A plus for a coaching hire. That goes to NC State naming Will Wade the head coach after parting ways with Kevin Keatts. Kevin Keatts, just 1 year off of a Final Four appearance, is on his way out, and I think it was the right move. It was a surprising move, to be sure, but this is a program that made a heavy, heavy commitment that they are not just looking for flukes. They want to compete at the top of the ACC, and they are going to invest like it. You cannot make a bigger statement with that than hiring Will Wade. Now, Will Wade comes off of NCAA issues, of course. At LSU, he overachieved until we now know he was under FBI investigation. And I think that's an important distinction here, because I've seen some people say, look, at the end at LSU, it wasn't even going well. Well, we now know that they were under the watch of the federal government. So yes, in a landscape that we know involved cheating, a team that got caught cheating was no longer able to keep up with the other teams that we know were cheating. I'm just not that surprised by that. Like, sorry if that's some hot take, but I really don't find much surprise in the fact that he struggled in that very specific circumstance. By the way, most of what he was doing is now fully legal. And so he can take that model, he can do all of those things at NC State, and there are no issues. It's actually encouraged. He can go fundraise, he can go get these players the offers that they need. And so, for a guy who overachieved at VCU, who overachieved at LSU, who had that program in an upward trajectory where they were landing big time prospects without the type of investment necessarily that other SEC programs have had, I think that this is a home run hire. You saw what he did at McNeese. He proved that he is one of the best coaches in college basketball. He is able to collect this talent to go out and pitch a solid style of play and put all the pieces together. I think he will do that at NC State. I think that if they can continue to invest the NIL, the recruiting budget, all of these things that are needed, there's no reason why they can't make a rise towards the top of this conference and really start to compete early on in his tenure, because that ACC, as I said already, wide open right now. There are so many teams that are making investments out of that conference to try to get into that elite top tier, to try to push this thing back in the right direction and get things evened out with the other top conferences in college basketball. I think Will Wade's going to be right at the forefront of that at NC State. A home run hire, an A+ hire in my book. When we come back on the other side, we still have plenty more coaching decisions to break down, to grade. We'll start with Texas on the other side. Welcome back in as we continue rolling through coaching carousel grades on this special episode of Three True Values. We have reached the back half here. We've got 7 more hires to break down, to grade, and we have reached Texas. That's right. The alphabet here in terms of these hires is very skewed towards the back half. But we get to Texas, where Rodney Terry is on the way out. He, of course, became the interim head coach when Chris Beard was fired for cause following a domestic dispute. That decision to retain Terry after that season comes after a successful NCAA tournament run. I felt at the time it was a risky and probably not a worthwhile move to keep him. It felt like it went kind of forced, that it probably wasn't popular among the boosters. It probably wasn't popular among the administration, but it felt like they had to because of his success. And if you're feeling like you have to give someone a job, it's not going to go well. I don't care how well of a job he did. It's just not conducive, especially somewhere where you are so reliant on investment from others. So things fizzle out. Rodney Terry is out as the Texas coach. And so who do they go get? They get Sean Miller almost immediately, almost suspiciously fast. Almost like last time they had a coaching vacancy, everyone wanted to hire this one guy, and then they felt like they could not. That's right. Yeah, Sean Miller clearly was the target that Texas wanted to hire. They didn't. They now get to this point where they realize things probably aren't going to work out long term with Rodney Terry. And so they quickly rectify it, at least in their eyes, and go get Sean Miller. That's why it gets a B plus from me. I applaud that they went out and made this move, because it really was a situation where they maybe not got out ahead, because getting out ahead probably would have been choosing to not retain Rodney Terry as the head coach after the NCAA tournament run, but they didn't let this thing turn the wrong direction. They didn't let it go south over the course of a couple of years. Rather, they went and the second that things turned and they felt like it wasn't coming back, they pulled the trigger. And so I do applaud them for making that move. They go get Sean Miller, who, like Will Wade, dealt with some NCAA investigations during his time at Arizona, the last kind of big job that he held. So if we look at his era at Arizona and we look at comparing it to what will he be able to do at Texas, it's another fascinating one. I think it lines up pretty favorably the same way that Will Wade's does. Prior to those investigations, prior to what we now know was FBI, interference with their ability to do the job, he had pretty good success, had some good runs. Now he has got the task to improve upon what those results were at Texas. So it gets a B plus because he has not been to a Final Four trip. He has not been to the mountaintop of college basketball that Texas is now asking him to get to, even when he has had those big resources behind him before. But he is certainly on a short list of coaches who is capable of making that type of run. We move now to Texas A&M, where we've talked about Buzz Williams on the way out. He goes to Maryland after his 6 years with Texas A&M. Now Bucky McMillan from Samford takes over, a coach that I got to know decently well during my time in the state of Alabama. He was the head coach of a high school basketball team just 5 years ago, ends up getting the Samford job after being a dark horse candidate, somebody that people at least brought up in the Alabama search, which led to Nate Oates. Of course, that did not end up coming really into any serious focus, but he goes and gets a head coaching job at Samford after coaching some really good high school basketball players and implements his style called Buckyball. Now, this is going to be a complete culture shock for Texas A&M fans. Buzz Williams, who was all about offensive rebounding rate, grinding it out, gritty defense, that is not going to be the case anymore. Bucky wants to play an up-tempo, downhill, modern game of basketball. It is going to be fast. There are going to be perimeter shots taken. It is going to be a whole new look. So get ready for a complete overhaul of what Texas A&M basketball looks like. It gets a B- in my book for this reason. He has not coached top-end talent before. At Samford, he kind of put the pieces together of local products and a couple of transfer portal guys who were left over. And it got them into the NCAA tournament. It made them look competitive in the NCAA tournament. They looked like a team that was capable of some upset Cinderella runs. But he's now in the SEC, and that's about as big of a leap as you can make. He's got to find the right type of athletes to both compete against SEC opponents and run his style of play. I don't think that it's impossible, but I do think that it is a big enough adjustment that there is a huge risk reward on this hire. The reward would be that you're looking at a Nate Oates Mark Pope type of offense being run in the SEC at a program that has plenty by way of NIL, that has plenty of investment within it to become one of the top programs in college basketball. The downside would be that you've got a guy who's still learning the job, who's still figuring out now a new place on top of figuring out how to be an SEC head coach. So there is a lot to unpack there, a lot of fun going to be had at Texas A&M over the next couple of years as they move from one era into another, pretty much as cut and dry, as night and day as you can be in terms of the way that you're going to see them play. At Utah, Craig Smith is out in a little bit of a surprising move. They move on and hire Alex Jensen. Alex Jensen, a former Dallas Mavericks assistant who takes over as a college head coach. And if you're asking, does this feel a little bit familiar? It sure does, because Jensen is a guy who has been on the fringe of NBA head coach discussions over the past several of years, now gets the opportunity to coach at Utah in the college ranks. Just like last year when BYU hired NBA assistant Kevin Young after he received interest from multiple NBA teams. So it gets a B from me, and here's why. Jensen has to adjust to the way that things are, but he does so for a Utah team which is clearly investing right here, right now, in catching up to BYU. BYU made huge investment. They go out and they get AJ DeBonsa 1 year after hiring Kevin Young, clearly backing him with all the resources needed to become an elite program. And so if Utah is following suit, if they are all in here, there is no reason to think that they cannot also turn themselves into one of these NBA factories, one of these programs looking to invest heavy and create big results. I really like the hire. I think that the message is all there. It's all now about the execution from top to bottom. Him learning how to coach the college game, him learning how to build a staff, build a roster at this level, as well as the program learning the proper ways to invest and how to build a roster to best compete in that Big 12. As we move on, we have the Villanova job. Kyle Neptune on the way out, the successor to Jay Wright. Things just did not pan out perfectly with that hire. Way too many ups and downs in his tenure as the Villanova head coach. Some big wins, but they were always followed with some just head-scratching losses along the way. And so Villanova makes a pretty splashy hire. They wait out the process and end up with Kevin Willard, fresh off of a deep NCAA tournament run with Maryland. As we said earlier in the show, it was a little bit controversial how Kevin Willard went about taking that job, but from Villanova's perspective, I don't see anything wrong with it. They get an A- from me. They go get one of the best coaches in college basketball. I don't think, hands down. He has been really, really good at building whatever program he has run. He returns now to the Big East, a conference that he is familiar with. There's a lot of talk in this House settlement era that we're potentially moving into, that the Big East could have big advantages without football to allocate resources to. They could be at the forefront in terms of building rosters in college basketball. So you make that move, you take that gamble, you look at what he could potentially build there at Villanova with the historic success, with what Jay Wright was able to do, the amount of NBA stars across the league that are now promoting the brand of this school. Yeah, I think that it is a really good hire and just further builds. You look at that ranking there, and we'll talk in just a second about a little bit more how good the coaches are in the Big East now. It is a loaded group of coaches there ready to bring that conference to the next level. Moving forward, we have the Virginia job. Tony Bennett steps down before the season, leaves Ron Sanchez in charge. Things do not go well. Virginia does not have a good season. They kind of just struggled across the finish line, just getting into a new era. It was time, it felt like, to hit reset after a Hall of Fame coach. And so who do they go and hire? They hire Ryan Odom, former VCU head coach, former Utah State head coach, and before that, UMBC coach. And Virginia fans will know that very well because he became the first head coach to ever lead a 16 seed over a 1 seed in NCAA tournament history when he did it against Virginia. So, an interesting tie in here. This hire gets a B from me because I think that Ryan Odom is a really, really solid basketball coach. I think he has had success at UMBC, obviously, unprecedented success. He then had success at Utah State. That landed him the VCU job, where again, he was successful at VCU. This is a guy who has just kind of been a really solid head coach everywhere he has been. And I think he will do the same at Virginia. I think that there is a good regional tie. I think that it sticks kind of with the culture of the program. I think that this was just a really, really good hire. Was it a great hire? I'm not sure. He could definitely, over the course of time, get this thing to a level where Tony Bennett had it. And yes, that would make it a great hire. But for right now, I think that it puts them in the mix to solidify themselves, to kind of stabilize where they are in the ACC, and to start building forward and resurge towards the national stage. I think they needed somebody to steady the ship. I think they got it. And I think that there's definitely upside there as well. And finally, or excuse me, not finally, we got one more after this. I just can't keep track of how many there actually were. Thankfully, this was not like an extended. If we had 20 something of these, I don't know. We might have had to do 2 episodes. We might have had to split this up. But we go to West Virginia, where Darian DeVries exits after 1 year. Of course, controversial to leave a job like this after 1 year. Such a proud fan base. And this has been a trend of multiple fan bases who feel like they were done wrong by coaching changes, by the way that coaches went about leaving. Well, West Virginia is right in that boat. They have every reason to be. Darian DeVries heads out after just 1 year in charge of West Virginia. They get snubbed for the NCAA tournament, and you have to wonder, would he have viewed it just a little bit different if that hadn't have happened? Who knows? Pretty much impossible to tell that for sure. But they replaced Darian DeVries with Ross Hodge. I give it a B minus, and it fits into the same category as a lot of these other B minuses. They're not bad hires. They're not C's, they're not D's, definitely no F's this year. I think that every hire has been pretty solid. I think it's been good hires. But the B minus comes in that there are more question marks that have to be answered before we can call it a success. Some of these head coaches that we've given A's, that we've given B pluses, it's like, okay, yeah, we know it's going to work. It's just like, how well will it go? What is the ceiling? Can they surpass what the past coach did? Those are the questions that we're answering. With Ross Hodge and some of these B minuses, there's a little bit more of, okay, well, it worked here. Will it work there? Because there's a step up. He's going from North Texas to West Virginia. He has had some really good success. I think for what North Texas is, had like really, really good runs. He is also a coach who, if you're West Virginia and you're concerned about the next step after the fan base's reaction to Darian DeVries, this is a loyal guy. This is a guy who stayed at North Texas as an assistant coach under Grant McCasland when he had other opportunities. He felt like the best thing for him was to stay loyal to that school and to that coach. And so he remained on staff, waited to become the head coach. And it has paid off now because he gets the West Virginia job. He takes over and will bring his unique style, very slow tempo, very much going to grind it out. And I think that fits West Virginia well. I think that there is a real potential for this to pay off. As long as he can adjust to the Big 12, as long as he can make this kind of leap to the next level as a head coach, as a recruiter, as a facilitator of NIL funds, which is a lot of what coaching is these days. I think that there is every potential that he could stick there for a while and that he could have really good success. And if you're looking for a maybe not silver lining would be the right term, because I think I've said plenty of good things about this hire. But if you're looking for what could be kind of the golden ticket here of this hire, is that Hodge is a disciple of Grant McCasland. McCasland took that same pathway from Baylor to North Texas. Then he took Texas Tech. And just look at how good Texas Tech was this year. So if Ross Hodge can do that type of work, if he can get that type of backing, look out. He could be one of the next very, very good head coaches in college basketball. Now we wrap things up here with the Xavier job. Sean Miller heads to Texas. Another one where the fans feel a little bit spurned. The second time that Sean Miller leaves Xavier. First for the Arizona job, now for the Texas job. I'm not sure how upset you can really be, because those both feel like clear upgrades to the top of the sport. So I'm not going to lose sleep over it. But if you're a fan, obviously, you don't want to be used as a stepping stool, especially if you're a proud program like Xavier that has worked its way up, now in the Big East, now in this premier conference with great basketball coaches. They get another great basketball coach. I don't think they'll miss a beat. They get an A- from me as they hire Richard Pitino, one of my top mid-major coaches in all of college basketball. The things he did at New Mexico should not go underappreciated. I mean, he had New Mexico as a perennial NCAA tournament team, a team that had really talented players, that was able to get some wins in the transfer portal. I can only imagine what he's going to be able to do at Xavier as he now builds a Big East program, as he takes another step back forward into the top of college basketball. I think he was ready for it. I think that he has proven himself that he's part of this next era of coaches that is going to take a big leap forward. I think that now competing against his dad within the conference is going to be one incredible storyline to follow. As I mentioned, all the other coaches that are in that conference as well. So that wraps it up here. We've graded all 14 high major hires through this coaching cycle in the 2025 off season. Now, what is the only thing outside of a retirement or potentially some kind of scandal that could shake this up? It would be the NBA swooping in and taking one of these top coaches. So we'll run through a couple of the guys, the candidates in college basketball to be the next head coach making their way into the NBA. On the other side, as we close out an episode, a special coaching carousel episode of Three True Values. Welcome back in as we wrap up the Three True Values coaching carousel special here, with just a couple of names to know if the NBA comes calling. Who are the college coaches who could be on their way to the professional ranks next? Not sure that it's going to happen this year. There was some speculation early, but it feels like everyone that would be on this list feels pretty comfortable where they are entering the season. So I'm not sure that anyone would walk away from what they have right now in order to make it happen. But if we're looking at the top candidates to do it someday, Dan Hurley has to go to the top of that list because he's already been asked. Last offseason, coming off of back-to-back championships at UConn, we know that the Los Angeles Lakers made a run at him, tested his interests in that job to see if he would make the leap. He ultimately decides that he's going to come back to UConn. He gets an extension, gets all kinds of things set up there. So he's in place now. Like I said, I think that he's got a good group coming in. But once you're a back-to-back national champion, it's hard to ever reach the kind of pinnacle of where you were. So does he ever get that itch to coach in the NBA to prove that he can do it at both levels? We will see, because it has gotten quite a few coaches to make that leap in the past, some with great success, others have been a little bit of a flop. But you always know, if you're his level of coach, that you will have a soft landing spot, that you can come back into college basketball whenever you want and land the top job of that cycle. So very little risk there, in my opinion, if he were to decide at any point he wants to make that leap. Nate Oates is another one. Look, just look at his style of play. It fits the NBA perfectly. Have no doubt that there are NBA teams that have gauged his interest, that at least have him on a short list of coaches to watch if their job comes open. Because I think that beyond the style of play, beyond the fit, there's also just a comfortability that he has at Alabama, where I can I can tell you this from the time that he arrived at Alabama, at least a year or two in, it felt like he was starting to get rolling, like he started to have all the resources that he needed to find success. It felt like he was comfortable at Alabama. And obviously, they have rewarded him. There have been contract extensions, there have been additional resources given to that program throughout the course of his tenure. Rightfully so, as he has led them to the first Final Four in program history, has them in the mix every season as a national championship contender now. I think that the biggest risk for Alabama losing Nate Oates is not in the college ranks. I do not believe there is a college job that could come open which could poach Nate Oates. I don't. We've seen Kentucky at least be named in the mix for him, and he turned it down immediately. He let it be known quickly that he was not interested. Louisville, no. Maryland, that got shut down immediately. I don't even know where that came from, honestly. Did not get in the mix at Texas. So, what are the other ones out there? I mean, I guess Michigan State would be the somewhat interesting one, potentially, because of his connection to Tom Izzo, because of his connection to that area of the country. But I don't think that it provides him a better situation than Alabama, and I don't think that he's particularly looking to go back to that area of the country, just desperately looking to get out. So don't see that one either. So what else? Like Duke, North Carolina? Because I don't think Duke is opening anytime soon. Could North Carolina, like what resources do they have to throw at him? Because we've seen Alabama beat North Carolina for some recruits, for some transfer prospects as well. So I think that the NBA is the biggest threat to take Nate Oates away from Alabama. I think that it would be that challenge, that ability to get something added to your resume. To win at both levels is a special group of coaches that have been able to accomplish it. And so I can see the intrigue that would be there. Now, one more name that is on this list that is definitely not going this year is Kevin Young at BYU. Kevin Young already was in the mix for NBA head coaching jobs. Rightfully so. He was the guy who a lot of the Phoenix Suns players wanted to take over that job. Some of their star players, Devin Booker, included on that list. He ends up making this leap to BYU when he doesn't get that head coaching job, and now has AJ DeBonsa. So this year it is not happening. Look, Kevin Young is not going to make a leap when he's got the number one player in the country coming to his roster. But beyond this, who knows? Can BYU consistently go out and get the top player in the country? Can they consistently have one of the best rosters in college basketball? I'm not 100% sure. And so I do think that the NBA will always be out there. I am sure that teams will make a run at him over the next couple of years, the next several years, trying to get him back into those ranks, trying to convince him to take over some real contending teams. And so I would look at him as a prime candidate to make that leap as well. That concludes our coaching carousel special. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you liked the grade if your team made a coaching change. If you don't, if you did, whichever way, feel free. Reach out, discuss it. Please. Any feedback you have, always appreciated here on the show. Any questions that you have, still appreciated. Still, we will work them into the show throughout the off season. We've got plenty more of these specials to talk about. We're going to do a weekly show on Thursday. We will likely spend a segment talking about transfers. We'll spend a segment talking about NBA draft prospects, NBA draft cycle. And that's how we'll go through much of the off season. But also can throw in any kind of questions, any kind of topics, any kind of news that comes up along the way, because as we know, college basketball never really sleeps. It just kind of moves on to the next thing. So once again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I'm James Fletcher. This has been Three True Values, and we'll see you next time.